I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done with you. I'm done with you and your mother and your sister. I'm just done with all of this. I'm sorry. No, 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 no. Why? Do you really hate me that bad? Why? Do you really hate me that bad? Why? Do you really hate me that bad? Why? Do you really hate me that bad?
Skype is trying to give me news updates in the middle of our talking, like I need to know about a shooting in the middle of my meeting. A little odd.
They're common enough in DC that I don't have any news updates on my phone, unless it's something more immediate, like there's another loss of water pressure in the pipes.
You'll just really have a problem with water over there, huh?
There's been a big effort to renovate the pipe network, but I don't know why the pipes lose pressure every so often. So there's a boil water advisory every couple months.
Hey, it's only the American capital.
Yeah. The country plows a huge amount of money into DC, and that's the only reason why it looks semi-functional. If DC had the same amount of money going into it as Detroit, it would look like Detroit.
It's a fair point. Yeah, infrastructure.
I mean, it takes a different way of thinking about infrastructure than say a school budget. There are so many things that require a bare minimum of things to get done right. There's so much scrutiny that you have to apply to the people running that infrastructure. And there is so little political will to actually take a close look at that and make sure things are being done as advertised.
Yep, and that's the thing, is we need to be willing to scrutinize at least just a little bit more. I mean,
well, Flint water is, at least as of a couple of years ago, still terrible. And Mark Zuckerberg could donate enough money to completely overhaul the water system. But here's the thing, why would he? Because you can renovate all the infrastructure, but if it's under the management of the same people who caused the crisis the first time, how do you know it isn't going to become a crisis the second time?
yep. It's got to be a system change at that point.
Yeah.
Like, it's all got to be a system change.
there's a different kind of mindset that you need to maintain complex systems, and I really don't think there's the mindset for that anymore. If I say, I made sure that these trains ran safely, reliably, and efficiently, does anybody get any awards? Do they get any cheers of saying, yeah, you're a great administrator? No. It's when things are in crisis that people get awards, not when things are running well.
Yeah. Unless you're Pete Buttigieg, someone's just like, where the fuck are you at any point during this?
Oh, God.
That motherfucker just never shows up. It's like, all right, these trains just keep flying off into factories and you're fucking your husband in a wine cellar? I don't know where you are, motherfucker. What is happening?
He showed up to the Baltimore Bridge disaster, supposedly to investigate, but he wasn't wearing the boots that would allow that are legally required to visit a hazard site.
You know, the workers probably watched him roll up, and they're just like, "This fucking get off the site."
At that press conference, you could see a bunch of people kind of glaring at him, and everybody around him had a hostile expression.
Yeah, nah. Which is nice. It's nice to be seeing a lot of that lately, to be sure, with a lot of various politicians, but also, I mean, at the same time, like, people are just starting to throw themselves. You see that there was another fucking security breach at the fucking Trump rally the other day? Dude just
Nope.
oh yeah, fucking, well, it wasn't anything like crazy as Thomas Crooks, but some dudes fucking tried to jump over the fence and started tackling a bunch of reporters.
Oh, that.
Yeah.
That's pretty minor. There was an attempted breach at an Air Force base a while ago.
I didn't hear about that. I did hear about shots being taken at the San Antonio military base. There was a car that drove up right to the gates, which I've been there. I think that was the same place that I went to for MEPS. You have to like go in through some shit to get to the gates. Apparently they just pulled off, popped off a bunch of shots and drove off.
God,
And then everybody was just like, we couldn't find them. Like, I'll bet. But what happened with that?
I don't know, but I'm very worried about the maritime situation. So we have virtually no ships in the Red Sea while the Houthis are trying to blow up civilian ships in that area.
Wait, wasn't Operation Prosperity Guardian, wasn't that in the Red Sea?
Yeah.
Did we move that?
They basically, the White House basically gave up on Operation Prosperity Guardian, and civilian ships have been attacked, including an oil tanker with more oil than was released in the Exxon Valdez incident.
After inflaming it, because shit really started popping off whenever they came in. So they just came in, flared up shit, and then.
Well, the Houthis attacked it. The crew was rescued by a French ship, and then 3 days later, the Houthis decided to set the ship on fire. So what's happening is oil's being released, and yippee.
Oh, nobody even cares about that anymore. Like, the fucking oil spills in the gas pipeline. The fact that whenever the water caught fire, I think people tuned out. I think that was the last time I ever heard anyone say any jack shit about anything, and that was like a day or two. This just happens so casually now. I mean, I go to the beach over on the West Coast. One of my favorite beaches is called Hobbit Beach, and there's parts of the sand where you're looking and you're like, that's rainbow. That's oil slick. And like you have like the little jellyfish things that'll like wash up on the beach, you know? They're coming in and they have like this rustic oil red kind of filling with the shimmer because whatever they take into their bodies, because they're like made up of all these different little parasites, it's meshing in with whatever it is, and it's making it look like these little Resident Evil things are washing up on the beach, kind of like Resident Evil Revelations. They kind of have all these like worm zombies washing up. It's starting to look like that. Like they almost look bloody. It's really creepy.
And then we don't have any carriers in the Western Pacific. And Chinese ships have been ramming Filipino ships again. So the military situation is kind of bad.
I hate living on the West Coast so much. 45 minutes over there is the ocean, basically. Maybe an hour, maybe a little more. But I just you kind of go over there and it's just a long flat coast, and then I'm like, oh yeah, China, Taiwan's right over there. Russia's right over there. We are
Yeah.
fucked.
So I avoid. I don't really look for news about the situation with China because almost all the news is bad. I
China
think.
Uncensored is really good. If you
Oh
ever
yeah,
see that
I've
one,
watched them. Not as much as I used to, but uh, they're pretty good.
that's the one thing I hate about podcasting is I don't watch podcasts as much as I used to now.
Yeah,
It's weird how that works. I hate that.
but there's a whole lot of fascinating details of Chinese society. Um, what's that crew? The China Show. I don't remember the names of the people in it, but they used to have fascinating things about the use of oil in cooking in China and what it was like to ride motorbikes in China when the government was trying to stop it. So, I mean, for a long time, people in China rode bikes rather than drive cars because they didn't have the money for it. Now the government wants to show off that they've got money, so they're trying to ban motorbikes.
This is fucking. And they just shit on the culture all the way through. Because, like, it is a beautiful culture. Creates beautiful things, beautiful people, beautiful art, beautiful music. And all we ever think about when we think of China is just hell on earth. And throwing your daughter in a river and selling off body parts. And it's like all this corruption and evil is just completely overshadowed the beauty of it.
China, the Chinese people have rich traditions. They're smart people, hardworking people. They've got great potential, but the government's a bunch of incompetent psychopaths. I don't think they're nearly as incompetent as a lot of people in American politics, but some of the stuff is just mind-bogglingly stupid.
It's panic moves. It's so many different panic moves. They don't think ahead long term. It seems like things just happen in China and they freak out.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why I'm holding up this book again. It's Gunther Diamond, The Vampire Economy, Doing Business Under Fascism. What was supposed to be a planned economy ended up being the government using every sort of emergency procedure to try to keep things kind of running. They had a long-term plan, but it was pointless. What actually happened was a whole bunch of emergency efforts to stop this part of the economy collapsing, then a whole bunch of effort to stop that part of the economy collapsing.
And I imagine your definition of emergency broadens because if you have emergency powers, I imagine when it works the first couple times, you're like, oh, damn, that was a real clean solution. And then you could just start declaring emergency all over the place so that by the time you have real emergencies, you've used up all your resources and you're like, shit.
Yep. And you get crazy things in China because nobody trusts each other. So one of the things is, oh, there's a lot of flooding in China. So
Yeah.
how do you deal with that? Storm drains. What happens if the drains are fake?
They put
It's
fake storm
cheaper to
drains
put
in.
it's cheaper to put in a fake storm drain and bribe the inspector than to have a working storm drain.
And then you watch another Chinese village get wiped off the face of the earth. It happens a lot. It doesn't make the news a lot, but like, yeah, they get hit a lot with a lot of like flash floods and mudslides and earthquakes. Like, that's a lot to have to manage.
So that's kind of what we can expect to look forward to if if there's just too much government control and too many psychopaths in power.
Yeah. I'm just really hoping they don't rig the election this year. Because I think if they don't rig it, everything's going to be fine. But I think if they rig it, we're fucked. But I think it's being rigged right now. But again, it's not that Trump is a savior. The move by RFK to drop out and join Trump's cabinet, I actually really admired that.
The Republican Party isn't what it was 10 years ago. It's something fundamentally different. It's more of a coalition of genuinely democratic people with wildly different ideology and ideas, rather than being a typical series of interest groups. James Lindsay would be a Democrat in normal conditions, but because the conditions aren't normal, he's basically tilting towards the Republicans.
Yeah. That's how I feel. I still consider myself classically liberal, but it's like the way that things are now, it's like it's looking like I'm a Republican, not just because people put me in that camp, but because of the conditions that have been made. It's like, yeah, I definitely feel more, it seems to be more conservative, I guess. It's weird how it just,
I mean, and I think a lot of this, the intellectual implosion of the Democratic Party, some of it's the effect of social media, but I think most of it is the effect of they've managed to win elections without really competing on ideas or people. When you can win elections without a degree of self-assessment and without paying attention to the actual management of conditions, it creates a certain sense of complacency and insularity.
yeah. And it's like some of the reasons I've heard for like, why are you voting for Kamala? Well, she cares about women and she cares about black people and she's just not Trump. And it's like, is that all
And
y'all
what's
got?
it? Vibes are authoritarian. Okay, I'm overstating it, but when people can rule without making promises or explaining themselves in detail, it simply becomes an excuse for the unrestrained use of power.
Yeah.
One of the things that was considered a democratizing feature in French society was the idea that things could be analyzed by others, that claiming special expertise over something that could not be reviewed by the general public was regarded as something tyrannical, but the ability to analyze things by the general public was considered liberating. And now America is reaching that point.
This is just getting fucking scary. I mean, it's been scary for a long time. Then again, there is a turnaround happening to a degree, but like, you're not going to see Kamala Harris sitting down on a podcast for more than 2 or 3 hours like you are all of these other candidates. And it's like, because there's nothing for her to say. There's
She's
nothing for him to
genuinely
do.
dumb.
She's an idiot. And it's like not even that, but she's mean-spirited. She is a mean drunk wine mom. She is the fucking mom that shows up to the PTA meeting that has like maybe 2 or 3 friends, majority of the power for some fucking reason, and all the other moms despise her because she's like an energy vampire, and also her kid's the fucking bully of the school. That's the vibe she gives. Like she's just foul. And the dystopian slips like one day wars will not be fought over oil; they'll be fought over water. She can't even keep her mouth trap shut, which like I guess we should be grateful for that. But by that same degree, it's like, bitch, you for someone so dumb, you are in on too much. You're in on too much, and it looks like you're a part of way too much. And that whatever this too much is needs to be stopped by us, the actual American people, because bitch, you're not an American. You're an American citizen, but you do not have the heart and spirit and passion of an American. You hate America. All these Democratic politicians have proven they hate America. I mean, They've been encouraging insurrection ever since George Floyd died. Didn't get killed. Died. At least in my opinion. They've been waging a series of insurrection the entire time, and they were able to fucking get one off with fucking January 6th via federal infiltration. And then they just always point to that and go, but what about January 6th? But what about January 6th? But what about January 6th? What about everybody else? And the damage that was actually caused? What about May 29th, when Antifa showed up and stormed the White House before January 6th ever even happened, during the Trump administration? No one ever talks about that. That was an insurrection. Kamala Harris is an she supports insurrection. I'm not going to call her an insurrectionist. Again, you don't call someone who's not a soldier, I guess, but she's supporting it and she's encouraging it and she's inflaming it, and all of her cohorts are, and they want us to be at war. And in her mind, that war is going to involve us not having fucking water. Well, she needs to be investigated. All these people need to be investigated to fucking hell for so many statements that have been made.
I despise her, but the water comment, I understand. Has been speculation over the past 20 years that there's going to be increasing fresh water shortages, and the countries will be hostile about it to the point of war. So
yeah, well, where's a lot of our water in this country going though? Saudi Arabia. I mean, you have these companies coming into America and they're fucking taking all the water and they're fucking taking it away from the cities. Like in fucking Arizona, you have all these foreign companies that are allowed to come in. The Chinese do it too. And then they steal our resources, and one of those resources is water, and they're just allowed to fucking do it or build around our bases the entire time. Joe Biden hasn't said nothing about that these last 4 years.
Joe Biden, his clique knew that they were probably dealing with the front for Chinese intelligence. I assume that he was already deeply compromised by them. And Gavin Newsom decided to go off to China and meet Xi Jinping. I think there's a lot of Democratic politicians, especially on the West Coast, who are basically implicated by China. And it is sometimes people choose to ally with an outside power rather than be identified with their own society.
Well, and left-wing ideology, all this woke communist Marxist shit, it doesn't allow for that. It's inherently anti-American. You can't align yourself with America under those conditions. And yeah, I mean, you got Chinese businesses lining up and down the West Coast, like in Eugene, Nike. Like America's Nike facility is based in Eugene. That's a lot of Chinese fucking money. You got a lot of Uyghur slaves making those fucking shoes too. But Nike brings in all the business to the football stadiums here, like Atunes or the college stadium or the colleges, and but simultaneously, it's and I started thinking about this after the stuff with the kill the Jews at the campus started popping off, and I'm just kind of thinking about how during the protest, criticism of Israel was never criticized once. No one here really bats an eye if you make reference to the point like all of the fancy cars, all of the shit that looks like it came out of Need for Speed. You see one drive by, Asian. All the fancy apartments going up, Asians. You know, all of the college, the money you get from colleges, the grants and the scholarships, Asians, foreign exchange. No one ever says any differently if you say that. And obviously, I'm not trying to make like a racial claim against Asians. It's just to say like the power and the money and a lot of that and a lot of the benefits goes towards foreign exchange and a lot of the Chinese students, and it's well recognized. And it's no one ever bats an eye when you say anything about it. Like they may not say something about it, but it's always kind of a just yeah, and then move on. So it just kind of makes me wonder what the future looks like in terms of like me never really like taking the time to think of, well, why am I why does no one ever come at me and say anything about my criticism for Israel despite all this anti-Nazi shit and everything else they're coming at me for? So part of me is just wondering like, why am I allowed to just say that about the Chinese students here? Like, and never meanly, of course. I'm never going like those damn Chinese or anything like that. It's just like it's just an observational fact, I feel like. Could mean nothing. Also, just
There's
something I've noticed.
uh Chinese people for a long time were not able to invest in normal businesses. And when they were eventually allowed to invest in businesses, quite often they were scamming out of their money. The only safe investment in China for a long, long time was real estate. So that meant that when Chinese people had enough money to get out of the country and invest, they would invest in real estate. So that dramatically increased housing prices and real estate costs around the world, notably London, Vancouver, and other places.
Jesus.
So for a lot of Chinese people, the expectation was real estate prices will always go up. So when they had money in China, they tried to move it abroad and to invest it in what they expected would work, which was real estate.
Makes sense.
And frankly, because communist China is such an unpleasant place for a lot of people to live, getting to be an exchange student in America is kind of the golden ticket for a lot of them.
Mm. And I don't want it to like seem like I'm shitting on any of these people at all. I don't know their backgrounds. I don't know their stories. Just this is just societal observation. So I just want to throw that out there too. I don't want there to seem like there's any hint of like malice in what I'm saying here. It's just I don't know. It's just because like we live in a country that's supposed to be equal, and then you just kind of realize that things aren't equal, and that people just kind of notice it. And it's just like at the end of the day, it's just all about making it better, you know. So, but yeah, sorry not to cut you off there. I just want to throw that out there because I realize the way I'm talking about it, it may sound a little more hostile than not, but it's not that at all. It's just
Well, I noticed there's a lot of people in DC who love to talk about the Israel-Palestine situation, but don't want to talk about the actual problems of policing. So for some reason, there's a lot more interest in that conflict than in anything that actually directly impacts one's community. Now, it's an important war. It's a strategically important conflict, but that tends to suck up a lot more attention from local politicians than local politics.
well, and I'm seeing yesterday that they were talking about Russia potentially invading, I think it was like Kazakhstan or something, and I was just thinking in my head, well, I've definitely don't know anything about this country, but I'm preparing myself for everybody to become an expert here in the next month. And everybody's going to teach me everything that I need to know about Kazakhstan and why we need to save their culture and the LGBT community in Kazakhstan. And that's kind of what they are, as distractions. And, you know, again, for like any of the people who are in BLM or Antifa or any of that, what you just said, they're taking it further and further away from the point of like, hey, we should really be looking at this whole police brutality thing. They're like, no, we should be looking at Israel Palestine. Shut your fucking mouth. Like, that's how far they've been willing to get away from what people were screaming for all over the world. Is people initially were just kind of crying like, we want accountability, we want change, and the elite were like, okay, you're gonna get World War III. Fuck you. That's the deal we got out of all of this. Seriously. And it won't get better until this is stopped. And I hope to see that day. I hope to make the change for that day to one day happen. But like in the meantime, the first week post-Trump assassination, I felt really good, and I was like, "Oh my god, people are actually feeling a little bit humbled. They're biting their tongues." And then the week passed, and it's like, "Oh, you would have fucking hid Thomas Crook in your basement. Fuck. This is getting a little bit horrifying." Reality in their pathways, and
I have to wonder, how would that person think that sharing that would make the situation any better?
I don't know, and part of me wonders because there was a degree of me maybe even testing out the waters with them to be like, okay, where are you thinking about where I'm at, and maybe bringing up a conversation to kind of be like, seeing where she may have fell. That may have been the same thing coming back at me because I mean, more paranoid people are with each other. It's kind of like there's a testing of the waters. I feel like with people now to see where each other is at politically before we can like actually open up. Like, it's like if you can like read what someone says about pronouns, for example, you think you've got them all figured out. Whereas if you figure out someone's comfortable with not talking about the pronoun shit and is actually against it, well, then you can go and open up to that person. It's the walls are getting thicker and stronger that we're building between each other.
I mean, that's why it's generally assumed that any Hollywood actor who doesn't participate in a Democratic fundraiser is a Republican.
Yeah. Apparently, that new Reagan movie is really good. My mom was telling me all about that one. It's Dennis Quaid, who anytime I see him on podcasts, he actually knows a lot about Reagan and that side of history. So I was like, oh, that could be fun. It's kind of the whole taking on Hollywood and communism and kind of that angle of things. It looked really interesting.
Oh boy, I wonder how they handled it.
I don't know. See, Reagan's one of those that I was like really critical of for a long time, and I've come to realize as I've gotten older, I just don't know enough to have an opinion. So it's one that he's a character I want to dive more into, I suppose.
I don't just mean because he was an actor. I most know about are diplomatic policy, military policy, and economic policy. And at least on economic policy, a lot of people criticize him for his voodoo economics, but he accurately pointed out that a whole bunch of government programs were less effective because they were so overly complicated. And a lot of experts were claiming the Soviet economy was growing strongly, but he didn't believe those reports. And it turns out, yeah, their estimates of Soviet economic growth were completely off. So I think that's one of the things where you have a culture of reliance on experts, but those experts don't actually do any of the hard reasoning and illustrate the uncertainty involved. So it becomes a point of false confidence, and when someone goes to challenge them, it's very easy for people to have blind faith in the prior report rather than to listen to the concerns raised in the effort to present a countervailing view.
Makes sense. So,
Now,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
one of the big complaints I have about Reagan is that Pentagon spending was out of control, and that there were lots of very expensive projects that were being put forth in the 70s with a lot of badly designed research programs, equipment. And there's a lot of cool stuff that got built in the 80s, but Reagan's effort to boost the Pentagon budget just meant there wasn't the discipline of trying to make sure these programs were efficient. They just kept on letting money be wasted by defense contractors.
What were examples of some of the programs?
The F-111, technologically interesting, but it was an extremely expensive program that didn't actually produce anything particularly combat effective. The B-1B, technologically interesting, but it didn't carry a lot of bomb load for what was meant to be an interesting aircraft.
I see. So like, I'm trying to think of the way to phrase this. Where was he in terms of like militaristically, like what was his mindset in terms of like foreign affairs and America's involvement in other people's issues? Again, this is one that I'm really, really ignorant to. It's one of those things where I could have pretended to you when I was younger, and now it's just like I don't fucking know. But I'm all ears because I want to learn.
What's her name? Secretary of State. What's her name? Not George Shultz. He was basically doing what he was told, but where's the or was she Jean Kirkpatrick. Jean Kirkpatrick was basically the brains behind Reagan's foreign policy. Her formal position was representative to the UN. But she was famous for articulating the view that a non-communist dictatorship was preferable to a dictatorship that could be subverted by the communists, on the theory that a non-communist dictatorship would collapse shortly, but a communist dictatorship would not collapse until the Soviet Union would.
Jesus. Was this just like a theory she was throwing out there, just like how she saw things maybe going, or was this something she tried to like implement in practice and be like, we would want to lean towards one over the other?
She implemented it. She put it out back during the Carter years, but she implemented it during the Reagan years. That meant support for a number of governments that were nasty, but considered less likely to be nasty for a long time than a communist government. So that's one reason why one commentator who opposed her described her as more fool than fascist, because she had an articulated theory about why she was doing it, what the moral calculations were, and implemented it. So even her opponents recognized her sincerity in it.
Jesus. What were some of the countries we started allying ourselves with after that point?
El Salvador, it was a country with a lot of problems, and had a nasty civil war. And a lot of these Latin American countries had militaries that were not very concerned with due process. So if some of the people in their military clique found a suspect, quite often they would murder them. Well, guess what? If you have a relative that was murdered, you're not going to feel all that fond of the government. So it's very easy to get co-opted by communist militants because you already don't trust the government.
Yeah.
Apartheid South Africa ended up getting Reagan fought to get the pressure off of apartheid South Africa. Now, it wasn't a good government by any means, but they calculated that it was better to have a non-communist force at that vital strategic location because you've got the Cape of Good Hope, which is one of the main shipping routes in the world, and a huge amount of valuable raw minerals came from South Africa. Apartheid was a stupid system. It wasn't just immoral, it was often very stupid. But the Reagan administration preferred apartheid to a communist takeover.
So this might be a dumb question because, like, I've always heard of apartheid in South Africa, but who was being separated from who? Like, what was the class divide?
The theory was that groups should be allowed to be separate. In practice, that meant they were forced to be separate. So it was, in most places, it was considered Afrikaners, that is, the descendants of the Dutch, separate from various Black people groups. Zulus being separate from Sotho or Shona, depending on which name you want to give.
Because Zulu's more tribal, right? Like Zulu.
The Zulus were kind of a more warrior society, and they still responded to their king. The Xhosa also had monarchs, but They tended to be more urban and educated and had a global outlook.
Okay. Makes sense.
Uh,
And it also makes sense, like, because, like, you see all these videos that Vice was doing for a while in other groups to where you have all these white people in South Africa preparing for a race war. And when I first saw that, I was just like, what kind of race war y'all fitting to have? And it's, how many of y'all are there? So I'm thinking about white people. And then, yeah, hearing more and more stuff like this, it's like, oh, that's sounds like more of a reality for a lot of these people.
yeah, it's a nasty situation there. Uh, in many respects, the ANC, which was communist influenced, there's arguments about whether they were communist dominated or whether they were kind of pure crooks. They ended up causing a whole lot of murders during apartheid, and most of their victims were other black people. So so ANC supporters would oftentimes kill Inkatha Freedom Party supporters. So South African police and sometimes army units had to be brought into those neighborhoods to try to prevent people from killing each other.
Jesus.
It was pretty darn freaking nasty. The ANC did not have clean hands. It is a minor miracle that they didn't become genocidal when they took power, but there were a lot of nasty people within the ANC, and the general blind trust people had in the ANC has allowed them to get away with tolerating a lot of atrocities and murders.
What does the ANC stand for?
African National Congress. In theory, it was supposed to be the party fighting for the liberation of all colored and black people in South Africa. In practice, it was dominated by Shona tribal members with a handful of Zulus.
African politics is wild.
Yep.
Like, I'd love to live there if it wasn't so crazy. It's such a beautiful country.
Lots. Yeah, there's so much potential and so much potential wasted.
Well, and again, I've said it before, I'll say it again. For all the talk about slavery and black oppression and African American this and black people aren't fucking doing well, I don't see a lot of people in this country going over to Africa and helping out with anything. I see more white people going to Israel than I do see black people going to Africa. That's not to say it's not happening, and I don't want to discredit anybody that is, but it's like, again,
Ghana's got their
Africa's a
door
trendy,
open.
huh?
Ghana's got their door open.
What's going on over there? I feel like everywhere is just.
I mean, some places are better administered than others. So the Democratic Republic of Congo is not exactly the freest country, but they tend to be administered a heck of a lot more fairly than the Republic of Congo, which still has civil war problems.
Who
You've got,
doesn't at this point?
well, they call it a civil war, but quite often it's neighboring countries deciding to back rebel groups, which may or may not be almost wholly comprised of the armies of those other countries, to take advantage of resource extraction in that area. So for a long time, Zimbabwe had troops in the Republic of Congo trying to dominate some of the mines. Rwanda had troops in, well, a friendly rebel group in the Republic of Congo, again, trying to control some of the mines. So, is it a civil war or is it an invasion under the guise of a civil war?
God. And then there's China on the other side of all this. That just seems to be dipping its hand into all these different little issues across the country.
Yeah, and a lot of the deals that African leaders struck with China may not have been negotiated very fairly.
Yeah, seems about right. Got some examples?
Mauritania, I want to say the government allowed China to extract minerals from an area for a lump sum. So China ended up when they extract more and more minerals, they're not paying the government taxes or a premium on any added extraction. They already got a lump sum.
So they're already paid. They just got to keep going.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. So if they say we want more and you're going to give us more, then they're going to get more.
So some of it just seems to have been bad negotiating strategy, but others are that China agreed to build infrastructure, which was built terribly. And one of the ideas locals might have had would be that China would share the construction techniques, but they didn't.
China just sees them as peasants. They're just little worker ants. That's all they really are. They want global control, and anyone lesser than them they're going to use.
That might be a little optimistic. If you see some interviews with Chinese workers in Africa, they have a very low opinion of the locals.
And it just makes you think of like when the British went through Africa and like all the depictions you see of that. And they're just looking around at all the savages and they're whipping and they're wearing the funny hats and they're talking shit and they're putting their cigarettes out on the natives. It's like, it's not really much different, is it? It's just, that's the thing. I think we think that like so much of the earth has been like taken over and that we've set up so much that any form of colonization that can happen has happened in the past and it can't possibly happen again. So like these migrants coming into all these new countries, that's not colonization. Telling us to get the fuck out of our own country or telling us we're pieces of shit or our ways don't matter and our religion and our culture don't matter. And I don't mean me as a white person. I mean me as an American. Like all of us of all of our colors that we're antiquated and that we're going to have to accept this new way. That's colonizing. China doing that to Africa is colonizing. This is all just neo-colonization at the end of the day. And it's a cycle we could do forever if we fucking want, I guess. But it's not good.
As long as there are resources, people will try to take them. And they can do it with some moral restraints or without. And if you add in too many moral restraints, the morally restrained will be outcompeted by the people who have no restraints.
Just a fucking darkness.
Yippee.
Ugh.
I mean, one of the joys of being from the Balkans is that you get to see, oh yeah, people have fought over this dirt for a couple thousand years.
Yeah, it's America. It's just like there hasn't been a war on soil in my lifetime or any lifetime. And even World War II, there was no war on our soil. Nothing can ever happen here. And it's like people like keep saying they're like I've had people in my life. They're like, you've been saying there's gonna be a war here for a minute, and I'm like, yeah. Have you not been looking around? And they expect it to be like this big old fucking movie thing, but we don't really have that. I mean, there's a level of bloodshed for this country and on this soil, but like not to the same level that like Europeans do or most people over there. Like we've been really insulated from a lot of crazy shit.
There's a saying: God loves fools, little children, and the United States of America.
Fucking A.
America's been really, really lucky.
And the thing is we could use that luck. We could like be like, okay, we're in a better position than most anybody else on the planet in terms of this shit. We have a chance to get ahead, and they just are trying to keep us from getting ahead.
And to a large extent, America is ahead of a lot of the rest of the planet. When you look at material quality of life, with the exception of crime, Americans tend to have more material goods, more living space.
We have fat homeless.
Yeah.
We have obese. Like seriously, it's like And again, everyone's situation is their own, and I don't know anyone's story. And but all things considered, it's only going to get worse if we let it get worse. We have to make it better. We have to preserve what we have, realize what we have, and just start trying to backpedal in the other way to making it better. Because, man, I don't want to live like Africa. I don't want there to be like a civil war between like Virginia and West Virginia, and then there's another civil war between fucking Oregon and California, and then Texas and Canada are shooting shots all over these other countries, and it's just a big clusterfuck and nothing.
Remember, before the Civil War, there was Bleeding Kansas.
Explain that one a little bit. Not sure if I'm
Um,
thinking of the same thing.
Kansas was about to be admitted as a state to the Union, and because of the big fight over slavery, whether Kansas was a slave state or a free state would be extremely important for constitutional purposes. Most of the people who moved into Kansas were pro-abolition, but about a third of them were pro-slavery. And there were accusations that the pro-slavery people ended up intimidating and murdering people from the pro-abolition settlements, and vice versa. So there was a series of attacks, raids, murders, lies, accusations going forth about this faction did this faction did that in Kansas. So it became a sign that trying to peacefully establish a new state where local sovereignty could be a decisive factor was going to be subject to a lot of political violence because of just how high the stakes were.
And I could see that for even if Oregon wanted to do like the greater Idaho movement, how there's part of Oregon wanting to latch on to Idaho for better representation. There's people here who you'd think that they just want the conservatives to get away from them, but they actually get really pissed off with the idea of them leaving. And you try to explain it, you'd be like, well, they don't feel representative. Quite frankly, they don't like half the things you're saying right now, so they don't want to be a part of it. They'd rather go be with their own people. And there's just kind of this bitterness of how dare they leave me, and it's just like, well, this is all just theoretical talking, like no one's actually doing anything yet, but you see like the emotional response in people, and it's like, why would they want to leave? It's like, I don't know, hold up a mirror and realize that most people are acting like you, and that's not fun to be around, and that if the politics aren't supporting a certain class of people, then if that state right next to them is offering that and property and benefits, then why not? And then you could just like have your land and you have your land. It's just petty ex-boyfriend mentality. It's that toxic ex that just can't let it go. That kind of seems like what it would kind of be if they tried to do even something as simple as that, which wouldn't even be a national divorce. It would just be moving a little bit of state territory. Like people would probably fight over that. A couple people would probably die at the very least over that. Stupid as it is.
Well, also some of the weight in the electoral college would be shifted if Greater Idaho would go ahead.
Ooh, didn't even think of that.
So there is a political incentive to fight that.
And for me, I'm just kind of feel like I'm all for it. It's just like I see the way the conservatives are shat on around here. It's fucking ridiculous. The state of Oregon does not care about Republicans at all. They can all eat shit. All the legislation seems to be geared against them. The attitude on TV and commercials and all the political ads is if you're Republican, then you may as well be an insurrectionist. And it's like, who would want to be represented by that? It's fair to want to get away from that.
And I think something a lot of Democratic politicians have forgotten is that compromise is essential to getting broad buy-in. When there's a huge difference between winning a primary election and winning a general election. In a primary election, you have to appeal to a majority of that party's base. That is usually people who are committed to that, and they want dramatic statements. For people in the general election, you have to appeal to the general population, and quite often that includes people who have views different than the party's base.
Yeah.
But if you're in a one-party area and people can get into power by just appealing to the party's base and not to the general population, that causes politicians to have a mindset of just being focused on being the most dramatic, combative person and not thinking in terms of compromise.
Yep. And that's Oregon's biggest problem is the majority of Oregon, again, for people who don't know, we're mostly a redneck state. These are redneck, white, conservative, Christian Republicans. And all of our politicians, they try to pander to Portland, Eugene, and Salem as the main three cities because we're the blue cities with the most say because we have the majority of the population. But as soon as you leave those downtown areas, it's mostly rednecks. And it's the type of people that all of our politics are skewed against in this state. And they're the enemy class.
I'm so cold and you're never gonna see. I'm cold, but living on because of my belief. I'm nobody that you ever wanna be. 'Cause I know that the world is afraid of me. I'm so cold and you're never gonna see. I'm cold, but living on because of my belief. I'm nobody that you ever wanna be. 'Cause I know that the world is afraid of me.
Man, you can try to sedate me, assassinate or just hate me, but there's nothing you can do to me lately. Now I'm greatly accepted in the mind, so I'm confused and intertwined from being rejected so many times I wanna leave it all behind. So kind of you to pick up the album and give it a try for once and run and tell your homies that these motherfuckers will die for us. So many questions, fingers pointing for answers, suggesting that I'm the cancer that lingers inside the pasture of green grass. Onto my neck in situations that's too fast to think about, and most people can't dream about 100 million miles in every single second. And every time you hear this record, I want you to feel me on every sentence. Reminisce from descendants of past treasures. We'll embark on a journey that'll stay alive forever. That's how it's laying over on my side of the fence, regardless of the circumstances or the consequence.
I'm so cold and you're never gonna see. I'm cold, but living on because of my belief. I'm nobody that you ever wanna be. 'Cause I know that the world is afraid of me. I'm so cold and you're never gonna see. I'm cold, but living on because of my belief. I'm nobody that you ever wanna be. 'Cause I know that the world is afraid of me.
I am my own worst enemy. I'm not the smartest motherfucker in shit. I don't pretend to be. And why I am the way I am is not a mystery. My mind's not in proper working order. We're in therapy. Deranged, confused, and mentally abused. Life's been hanging on the string. So what the fuck I got to lose and what the fuck I got to prove to you? If you don't know me by now, you'll never know me. You can put that on my real homies. I got problems and they stack like bills. And I relate to the broken, bleeding heart, love killed. And I awaited in the shadows, awake in the dark, hoping to talk to the past on. I'm falling apart, I'm such a mess, indecisive, fading away. I'm out of touch with society and living today. Never relied on my sanity, I threw it away to become the maniac that's got your attention today.
I'm so cold and you're never gonna see. I'm cold, but living on because of my belief. I'm nobody that you ever wanna be. 'Cause I know that the world is afraid of me. I'm so cold and you're never gonna see. I'm cold, but living on because of my belief. I'm nobody that you ever wanna be. 'Cause I know that the world is afraid of me.
Can you keep a secret? Well, I'm afraid of the world because they want me to die. Can you believe it? But I'm still alive and been floating since 95 with my chin held high. But I'm so dead inside that the problems just roll up from my back into a pile because it's just a bunch of shit that I can't deal with right now. And I'm tired of always guessing and messing it up again. And the next day it's even deeper and I'm steady sinking in.
I took a look at myself and came to grips with what I found. It was a vision of a child disturbed and broke down. No soul, no heart, 'cause I gave it away. No time for feeling sorry, I'll grieve another day. And all those tears are stored in storm clouds that hover above me and cover the ugly. Continue to haunt me when I was feeling low. That's the same reason I hold on and never let go.
I'm so cold and you're never gonna see. I'm cold, but living on because of my belief. I'm nobody that you ever wanna be. 'Cause I know that the world is afraid the world is afraid of me. I'm so
Hidden and you're never gonna see.
I'm cold,
Forgiven no because of my beliefs.
I'm
Nobody that you ever wanna be.
Cause I know that the world is afraid of me.